We begin in California, where raging wildfires have now killed 44 people. The Camp Fire in the north of the state is responsible for all but 2 of those deaths, making it the deadliest fire in state history. Firefighters have made some progress containing it, but thousands are still displaced from their homes, and many will not have anything to come back to, as NBC's Miguel Almaguer reports.
This is what the firefight looks like in the mountains outside Los Angeles. The air attack swooping in just above fiery ridges, multi-million-dollar homes on the brink of disaster.
I am surrounded by fire.
Many neighborhoods overrun by an unstoppable wall of fire, a vortex of smoke and flames closing in.
It was a tornado. I mean, it wasn't going like this, it was swirling.
With embers raining down, firefighters face a hellscape, losing more homes over the weekend and 2 new flare-ups, causing panic on the freeway.
In neighborhoods like this one, where brush fires are burning, they could easily ignite nearby homes.
Across the state, the damage and devastation is staggering.
How quickly is this fire jumping from hill to hill?
Very fast, very fast.
Destroying subdivisions in the West Valley and mansions in Malibu, Neil Young, Miley Cyrus, and actor Gerard Butler all lost their homes.
Welcome to my home in Malibu.
Everyone grateful for first responders, including the president, who himself came under fire for blaming the blaze on California's management of forest land. Critics blasting back, calling the statement ill-timed. But on the front lines, no time for politics for those facing peril.
There's nothing left of anything.
With the loss here mounting, more danger is looming. The winds threatening to unleash hell on earth again. Miguel Almaguer, NBC News, Malibu.
Well, meanwhile, in the south of the state of California, the smaller but also dangerous fire of Woolsey is still burning, and high winds near Los Angeles are expected to continue feeding it. NBC's Kathy Park sent us this report from Southern California.
We are here in Southern California following the devastating Woolsey fire, and you can see behind me the destruction left behind by the intense flames. Thousands of acres have been charred. Hundreds of homes have been destroyed. Entire blocks like this one behind me decimated to the ground, covered in a thick blanket of ash. Right now, the Woolsey fire is still very active. Only 20% contained. Thousands of firefighters are still on the ground monitoring the situation, which is very dynamic and dangerous. The biggest challenge right now are the Santa Ana wind gusts, because they can flare up at a moment's notice, pick up embers, and that could start a small fire, which can swell into a much bigger fire. Meantime, in Northern California, it's also a very challenging situation there as well. It has broken a lot of records, becoming the most destructive in California state history, also matching the record for being the deadliest. So it is very heartbreaking to hear and see the devastation left behind. But this weekend, it also took a political turn when President Trump tweeted out criticism for forest management as it relates to the wildfires, and that received a lot of backlash from firefighters here in Southern California, who said that it was ill-timed and ill-informed. So there was a lot of back and forth when that tweet came out, but President Trump backed down as well with a softer message, a different tweet, which praised the work of the firefighters who are working around the clock. They've been working for days. They are fanned across the region, making sure there aren't any more flare-ups, because, as I mentioned, these Santa Ana wind gusts are a very big challenge. The situation still evolving, still very erratic.
Now, on November the 13th of 2015, France's national football stadium, cafes, restaurants and a concert hall were targeted in a night that many will never forget, especially those who lived through it. For the survivors of the Paris attacks, it's been a particularly painful and long road to recovery. Our correspondent Annelise Borges met with Catherine Bertrand, who was at the Bataclan on that fateful night.
J'ai pas compris tout de suite ce qui se passait. Au début, au tout début, j'ai pensé que c'était une blague.
It was Friday night, and Catherine was out partying in one of her favorite concert halls in Paris. when she was caught in unprecedented violence.
J'étais dans le mode, y a des pétards, c'est un enregistrement, c'est une blague. À partir du moment où j'ai vu les gens tomber les uns sur les autres, j'étais dans un mode de sidération.
3 attackers armed with Kalashnikovs and wearing suicide vests had entered the Bataclan concert hall, determined to carry out a massacre.
Oui, j'ai eu peur de mourir. Mais bizarrement, j'ai pas eu peur de mourir dedans. J'ai eu peur de mourir dehors. Les gens qui étaient dans la sortie de secours, qui étaient coincés dans la cage d'escalier avec moi, ne sortaient pas. Parce que ça tirait dans la rue. Et dans la rue, il y avait un bain de sang.
Across Paris, a series of coordinated attacks that Friday night left 130 dead and more than 300 wounded. The targets: football lovers, concert goers, people celebrating the end of a working week, people living their lives. 3 years on, Catherine is still reeling from what happened. As part of her healing process, she published a book, Chronicles of a Survivor, a depiction of her life's new chapter.
Donc pour moi, une survivante ou un survivant, c'est quelqu'un qui se bat pour vivre et essaie de trouver un compromis pour être le mieux possible avec sa nouvelle vie. Parce qu'on a plus ou moins tous changé de vie dans l'histoire.
Like Catherine and other survivors, France also changed as a consequence of the Paris attacks. But also like Catherine, the country's determination not to let what happened define it seems overwhelmingly stronger than the terror that struck 3 years ago. Annelise Borges in Paris for Euronews.
Well, Annelise joins us now live from Paris. Good morning, Annelise. How is Paris going to be remembering this day?
Good morning, Belle. Well, today, families, survivors and the families of the victims will gather for anniversary commemorations at each of the Paris attacks sites. Starting at 9 p.m., they will gather in front of France's National Football Stadium in Saint-Denis, where those attacks started 3 years ago, and then they will go to each one of the cafes and restaurants and come here to the Bataclan concert hall, where 90 people were killed. France's President Emmanuel Macron will not be attending the commemorations, nor will France's former president François Hollande. And the local elected officials that are going to be present have been asked not to deliver any speeches and not to give this event a political tone. The idea really is to pay homage to those 130 people killed 3 years ago.
And of course, Annelise, security has been stepped up since those attacks. Just describe to us what it's like to live in France at the moment.
Well, we're certainly past that wave of terror attacks that saw nearly 250 people killed in the space of 2 years. Of course, we all remember it all started with Charlie Hebdo in January 2015. Then there were the November attacks. Then there was Nice. This was a country that was in shock, and it still is scarred by the level of violence. However, authorities now say they are much better prepared judicially and even financially to tackle the threat of terrorism. They say that intelligence agencies here in France have prevented half a dozen attacks this year. There were, of course, 2 attacks, one in the south of the country that saw 4 people killed back in March, and one here in Paris in May this year that killed 1 person. But authorities say they do not believe in a large-scale coordinated attacks like the ones we saw happen 3 years ago. They are, of course, quite concerned with lone wolves, with individuals that could perpetrate that kind of violence. But this is nonetheless a much safer country, if one can say it like that. But of course, for the victims and for the families, this still is a very painful day to remember those who have fallen 3 years ago.
Now, if I say Spider-Man, the Incredible Hulk, or Black Panther, chances are you'll know who I'm talking about. Well, now the Marvel Universe is saying goodbye to its creator, writer, editor and publisher, Stan Lee, who's died at the age of 95. Let's take a look back at his life. The architect of the Marvel Universe, Stan Lee created or co-created most of the franchise's superheroes. Spider-Man, the Hulk, Fantastic Four, X-Men, Iron Man, to name but a few. Each of them an outsider, but with a very believable inside.
It's no fun reading about somebody who's perfect. You want to read about people that you can identify with, because we've all got problems and we're all flawed.
Marvel Comics started in the early 60s. Lee and his collaborators were risk takers, fleshing out their characters far beyond comic book norms. Lee helped take Marvel from a tiny venture to a Disney purchase in 2009 for $4 billion.
I never freeze.
Since then, Marvel movies and franchises have dominated the superhero world.
My son, it is your time.
Like Alfred Hitchcock, Lee didn't shun the screen himself.
Name? Stan Lee.
Towards the end of his life, Lee looked back with Marvel.
I still sometimes have trouble believing it, because all I was doing was trying to just make a living. So all I was doing was having fun. Enough said.
Stan Lee will live on in his characters.